I've heard all of you several times refer to no geographic limitation, and so for the purposes of the record, let it reflect that the AUMF that was passed out last year, Democrats put together, has no geographic limitation. So I think there is, although that was a subject of debate, nonetheless, there came to a conclusion to have no geographic limitation. So to that extent, you know, I know you've all raised it, and I want to deal with it. Let me ask you, General Dempsey, is it fair to say that Iran-sponsored Shia militias in Iraq, fighting ISIL is definitely their immediate interest, but would it also be fair to say they have other designs beyond that?
It would be fair to say that that hasn't become evident, but it is of great concern of us who have served in Iraq since 2003. Iran is not a new entrant into the crucible of Iraq. They've been there since 2004, and in some cases, their influence, their economic influence, and in other ways, has contributed to the future of Iraq, and in other ways, it has absolutely been disruptive to the inclusiveness or the potential for an inclusive governance. So, I mean, believe me, I share your concerns, and we're watching carefully. The Tikrit operation will be a strategic inflection point, one way or the other, in terms of easing our concerns or increasing them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that Soleimani is a cause celebre these days there, so I would like to believe that it is only to fight ISIL, but I don't believe that their purposes at the end of the day. We have different goals as it relates to Iraq, both in the short term as it relates to ISIL, and then in the long term of a democratic, multi-ethnic government. So it's a continuing concern. Now, Chairman Dempsey, you said in your remarks, and since I don't have a copy of your statement, but also correct me if I'm wrong here, something to the extent that the authorization as proposed by the administration basically or substantially, I think was the word, deals with our campaign as we have presently devised it. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, Senator.
Does it also deal with a campaign that may alter than you have presently devised it?
It deals with the campaign is presently designed and has statements in there. I don't know which part of it you might
well, if you're
reacting to.
Let me perfect my question. If, in fact, your campaign as presently designed needs to morph, change to the realities of what is happening, do you believe the authorization will allow you to do that?
Yes, I do. And that's because, as most of us who have both studied and served against these kind of threats over the past now almost 14 years, we believe that that the primary way you defeat these groups is by, with, and through partners in the region, and through sustainment of a broad coalition, and that the U.S. forces involved should principally be in enabling, not necessarily leading the effort, although the AUMF does provide, well, first of all, I will always go back to the Commander-in-Chief through the Secretary of Defense and recommend whatever I think is necessary to accomplish the task. But as I presently conceive, as we presently conceive of this threat and how to defeat it, this AUMF is adequate to the task.
Well, and I appreciate that answer because it underlines the challenge that members of the committee have in getting to the right point to support the President, this and any future one, to degrade and defeat ISIL, and at the same time, not to provide the open-endedness so that if, in fact, it meets your present criteria, but you believe it has the wherewithal to meet a future criteria that may morph, that is the essence of the challenge. And so last week before the Armed Services Committee, General Dempsey, you, in response to questions, said that your view of what no enduring offensive combat operations would mean would be mission specific. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I also said that it's not a doctrinal term. There is no word enduring in military doctrine, but it is a statement of the Commander-in-Chief's intent.
Right. And we all know that it may be the intent of someone not to have any large-scale, long-term offensive combat troops, but that intention can honestly change along the way. And so that's part of our challenge here. General Allen testified before this committee last week when we asked him, what does no enduring offensive combat operations mean to you? And he said, well, that could mean as long as 2 weeks or 2 years. And considering his experience, it was not an insignificant statement. So, Secretary Carter, what does it mean to you as ultimately the Secretary of Defense who oversees all of the armed forces under your department, of course, under the President's command? What does no enduring offensive combat operations mean to you?
There are two ingredients to this: the how and the when. And the AUMF, as proposed, is, as I noted, provides for a wide range of activities to defeat ISIL, but it has one significant limitation, which is the one you referred to, which essentially does not authorize the kind of campaign that we conducted in Iraq and Afghanistan. That is not what we foresee as necessary for the defeat of ISIL. So it meets my objective of having necessary flexibility, but there is that limitation. That is what is written in, and that is what the meaning of those words is. As regards the 3-year limit, as I indicated, that's not based on an assessment of how long the campaign will take. Right. That is based upon how our system works here at home, and it doesn't have anything to do with the campaign. And I appreciate that,
and that's what we did in our authorization. But even not an Iraq or Afghanistan size commitment still can commit thousands of troops for a long period of time. And so it may not be the size of Afghanistan or Iraq. So that's part of our challenge. Two very quick final questions. Secretary Kerry, one of the criticisms of the President's proposed AUMF is that it does not make clear that it is in fact this AUMF and not the 2001 AUMF that governs this conflict. If we passed a ISIL-specific AUMF, would the administration have any objection to specifically saying that the ISIL AUMF supersedes any preceding authorization for the use of military force in this engagement?
Senator, only if it was absolutely clear that there was no limitation whatsoever with respect to the other activities authorized by the 2001 AUMF, because that's the principal authorization with respect to al-Qaeda and other efforts. So the President has made it clear that if the Congress passes an authorization specifically, that is what he will rely on with respect to ISIS.
And if that's the case, there's no reason not to have language that says that this is the only authorization.
As long as it's clear that it's not
ISIS specific.
As long as it's clear it doesn't reach any of the other activities authorized by the 2001. Correct.
Finally, Secretary Carter, over the weekend, Boko Haram in Nigeria declared its allegiance to ISIL. Would Boko Haram be considered a legitimate target under the language of the President's proposed authorization?
The language of the proposed authorization anticipates, as I indicated, the possibility of other groups allying with ISIL, and what the text says is that the AUMF would cover such groups that associate with or fight alongside if they also have the intent of threatening Americans. So both of those tests would be applied under the proposed AUMF by the lawyer.
Just saying that you swear allegiance will be enough then?
No, it's not enough. There also has to be a threat to Americans. Okay. That's what the language says. It says associated with, etc., ISIL and threatening Americans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.